In my time covering video games, I have seen and talked about many fumbles on the part of major AAA game publishers and companies. But few fumbles are as hard as this one right here. PlayStation is apparently shutting down Bluepoint Games. This was reported by Jason Schreier just like an hour ago, and I just got to talk about this immediately because I am so thoroughly confused by this one. Bluepoint Games is among the most celebrated studios, and I think a studio that was positioned to be among Sony and PlayStation's most valuable. And given its successful endeavors and the talented team involved within, this just makes utterly no sense. Just what are you doing here, Sony and PlayStation? The full article here can be found on Bloomberg. Jason Schreier reported on this through sources who relay this information, and he just straight up says that Sony and PlayStation are shutting down Bluepoint. Roughly 70 employees will lose their jobs amid the studio closure, a PlayStation spokesperson said, and the decision was made following a recent business review. Bluepoint will officially shutter next month. The spokesperson further added that Bluepoint Games is an incredibly talented team and their technical expertise has delivered exceptional experiences for the PlayStation community. We thank them for their passion, creativity, and craftsmanship. Oh, please save your thanks when you're upending the lives of Sony people and have fumbled the ball on Bluepoint Games this hard. This is a company that Sony specifically acquired because their endeavors with Sony and PlayStation were so successful. Specifically, they were acquired in 2021 by PlayStation, and all indications seem to point to like a long-term partnership, especially after how successful the Demon's Souls remake was when it launched on PlayStation 5. And alongside that, they helped directly develop other like mainline Sony PlayStation projects such as the widely successful God of War Ragnarok. And prior to that, they would remaster or remake older titles like Uncharted and Shadow of Colossus, all of which were well received. This is a studio that has done nothing but be on a winning streak with their projects. People were straight up so excited to like contemplate what they might be working on next, what games they might be remaking given how good of a job they've done with that particular genre. Bluepoint is so renowned that, a lot of people would be willing to trust them with projects like a Bloodborne remake if that were to make their way. You can tell where their talents and specialities lie, but seemingly not so with Sony and PlayStation, given that after the God of War Ragnarok co-development environment that Bluepoint was dropped in, the next project that they were assigned was a God of War live service game that, got canceled on January of 2025. PlayStation said at the time that it was working with Bluepoint to determine the studio's next project. And I don't know if there were some initial talks behind the scenes on what Bluepoint might work on next, but I find it rather disingenuous for PlayStation to state that the reason Bluepoint was shut down was because of a recent business review, except Sony and PlayStation set them up for failure. You had Bluepoint, a development studio known for remakes and for helping with development of mainline Sony PlayStation titles, working on a live service game that they had no business making. A God of War live service, first of all, has no business existing. But then assigning that to Bluepoint of all studios, and then when that got canceled, for Sony and PlayStation to do a business review after they set Bluepoint up with a project that just didn't mesh with what that studio's capabilities were, and then looking at them and saying that their business performance just wasn't good enough after you made it that way is just so freaking egregious. Like, it really pisses me off and gets my blood boiling, because what a waste of a studio and talent for Sony to have acquired it in 2021 only for Sony to be the cause of its downfall and its eradication. Sony and PlayStation's mishandling of live services is freaking legendary at this point. I always refer to this tweet by Kami that highlights all of the live service games that completely fell apart over just the last year as of the release of this tweet, which was January of 2025. And you can see right here at this point, Sony and PlayStation have a graveyard of live services that were canceled or launched to great failure. Concord did launch, but 2 weeks after launch, they had to shut it down, issue full refunds, hundreds of millions of dollars wasted. Then you've got Bluepoint's God of War live service game that got canceled and likely in many ways contributed to the studio's shutdown after that business review that reviewed a business venture that failed because Sony set them up for failure. You've got The Last of Us live service game that got canceled, Spider-Man live service game got canceled, there was a Bend Studios one that got canceled, Twisted Metal, London Studios co-op game, Deviations multiplayer game, Payback, third-person Destiny spin-off from Bungie. All of this got canceled within a year. The only successful live service release on the part of Sony has been Helldivers 2, and that was a live service that they weren't even really expecting to succeed because it was kind of atypical for a live service. It actually went for something that was kind of unique, except that's what you need to actually stand out from the pack instead of pursuing your generic trend-chasing projects. And after having purchased Bungie, they've got Marathon coming up, which is a project that's had its ups and downs. Recently, the feedback has been better because of all of the overhauls that Bungie enacted after the game's delay, and they've been showing off that overhaul, and people are a little more optimistic, but still it's up in the air because it's such a different type of game than what people want out of Bungie, it being an extraction shooter, and them kind of leaving Destiny 2 right now to die off in the dust from the looks of it. And then there's this Horizon multiplayer game from GOW Games that was actually recently unveiled and announced, Horizon Hunters Gathering. You can see from the likes to dislikes ratio that people are not a fan of what Sony and PlayStation are pursuing here, with the art style not resembling anything that you would associate Horizon with how cartoony it is, with how it doesn't seem to take itself super seriously, whereas Horizon is actually a game series that does take itself seriously. And, just the stylization of this is just not in line with what people expect out of the Horizon series. So this is already not going down well, and it feels very tone deaf to what Horizon should be. And Horizon Hunters Gathering is very much akin to the same scenario that Bluepoint was stuck in the sense of this is a traditionally single player campaign focused studio, and they're being kind of shoehorned into this live service mold where they may not fit. Who knows, maybe Hunters Gathering could have the potential to do well, but the initial reception has not been good. And there's such a dislike trend that tweets like these are kind of making the rounds, with Paul Tansey from Forbes saying, "We call this the BioWare, where you interrupt your well-liked single-player game development to make a live service." That's kind of what's happening to GOW Games, with Horizon 3 still being ways off as a result of the fact that much of the focus at GOW Games is being placed on this Horizon Hunters Gathering live service. And with Bluepoint, something similar happened where there's a studio that should not have been working on a live service, but Sony had this big push for all major studios to try to attempt to work on a live service. Bluepoint tried with God of War. That, for whatever reason, got canceled. It didn't meet Sony standards, or it didn't feel optimistic enough, or enough of a good gamble for Sony to risk investing more money in that project. And I, for one, highly doubt that Bluepoint was the one who pitched, can we make a live service God of War game? They were likely looking forward to working on something that they specialize in. But Sony and PlayStation, having acquired Bluepoint and being the bosses, kind of corporately dismantled Bluepoint by assigning them this project that was never meant for them. And so Bluepoint never truly got to realize their full potential as a subsidiary of Sony and PlayStation. If they had assigned Bluepoint the right kind of project that they could have thrived in, that's well within their wheelhouse, we wouldn't be seeing this news today, and instead Bluepoint probably would have launched a game by now that probably would have gone on to do well and would have been incredibly well received. I just don't understand how they could have dropped the ball with Bluepoint this hard. When Sony and PlayStation announced that they were acquiring Bluepoint, it was among the most exciting announcements, among the most exciting acquisitions, because it felt like a match made in heaven. But instead of leveraging what makes that partnership work so well, Sony and PlayStation tried to force something that just never was meant to be. And the end result is the destruction of Bluepoint. This right here is just a generational fumble, and people utterly cannot believe that this is the reality, that Sony would choose to go this route, that they would shoot themselves in the foot this much. And I think it further highlights the adverse effects of a company that is suddenly blinded by the potential monetization prospects of live service. And scrolling through social media, you'll find that news about this has spread fast, with tons of people lamenting what is arguably among Sony and PlayStation's worst decision in the company's history, with plenty of folks highlighting how heartbreaking this is, how this is a total failure from PlayStation, what a complete fumble, this sucks, and so on and so forth. People saying things like, this is a depressing end to an amazing studio. Sony, what the actual fuck? You've got to be kidding me. Anyone remotely aware of Bluepoint's achievements and the potential of what they could have accomplished are coming out and speaking out about what a big deal it is that they got shut down, how utterly baffling it is that this is a decision Sony thought would be smart, and just how utterly tragic and egregious it is that Sony and PlayStation acquired Bluepoint only to destroy it just a few years later. Bluepoint Games is among the studios that least deserves this, And among the studios that could have, I think, done the most favors for Sony and PlayStation and future releases, and not just in terms of Remake, I truly believe that if they were handed the opportunity to make their own game, they could have seriously succeeded in that endeavor. But even if they were destined to just make remakes, they're so good at that aspect, replicating a game one-to-one from the original while still modernizing elements that are worth modernizing. They've struck that balance so well with past releases that, I shudder to think at what projects could have been and will never be because Sony made what is just such a ridiculously stupid decision. The dismantling of Bluepoint would be one thing if they would have sold it off to somebody else, but the fact that they decided to shut it down and end the legacy of one of the most celebrated development studios, it's just really infuriating, and there's a sense of foreboding for what Sony and PlayStation are starting to prioritize more and more, and if they keep heading in that direction, we may see other similar shutdowns of other studios if they don't succeed in their live service endeavors. That's the fear, at least, and those fears are warranted given that, of all the studios that people expected to be shut down, Bluepoint was so far away from people's minds, is one that nobody expected and that nobody felt necessary. I feel like PlayStation never offered Bluepoint Games an opportunity to truly shine. After their acquisition, just 5 years after launch, they're being shut down without releasing a single game post-acquisition. Once upon a time, Sony and PlayStation really valued nurturing these kinds of studios, especially newly acquired ones, and giving them the chance to take the years that they need to come into their own so that then they can start eventually making games at the level of Naughty Dog, at the level of Santa Monica Studios, Insomniac, Sucker Punch, you name it, all of who needed all of the years and all of the patience in order for them to find their footing, all of the nurturing that allowed them to get to where they are today. I thought Bluepoint would be the next studio to see that level of nurturing from Sony and PlayStation, but clearly that's a bygone era. If of all studios, Bluepoint Games is deemed as one that Sony and PlayStation need to shut down. But I don't know, maybe we'll learn more information down the line that reveals further details on why Bluepoint Games had to be shut down. But right now, I'm just Sony and PlayStation could have given them more opportunities and opportunities that suited this studio's talents better. And it just sucks that Bluepoint Games got shut down. But that's one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are and why you think Bluepoint Games got shut down and what you think about Sony and PlayStation's decision in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.